These are in listen-only mode.
Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar on enhancing the customer experience with our presenter today, SDI's Matt Greening. Apologies for the few minutes delay getting started, but we're now here, we're ready to go, so thank you very much for joining us. We're going to be exploring what's important to your customers based on Matt's experience working with service desks all around the world as an IT manager, as a service desk certification auditor and as a consultant. So welcome Matt, thanks for being here today to share your experiences.
Hi Zoe, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, coming through loud and clear. So what we're going to do today, in a second I'll hand over to Matt to begin your presentation. I'm going to be taking questions as well throughout, so if there's anything that comes in that needs addressing meanwhile, if you don't mind, I'll throw that open to you, Matt, but we'll also do some listeners' questions at the end as well. So please, everyone listening, do post your questions and we'll come to those. And just other than that, to say thank you to our sponsor of today's webinar, which is Sunview Software. And without any more ado, we'll get started. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Zoe. Okay, so I hope you can hear me okay and you can see the slides. We're going to talk about how we can enhance the customer experience. My name is Matt Greening. I'm a consultant and auditor at Service Desk Institute. Just a little bit of background about me. I've worked in various sectors within IT. I started as a service desk analyst way back in, way back when, let's just say way back when. And I've worked in various roles. I've worked as a service desk team leader, service desk manager, service delivery manager, and as a head of IT. I've worked in various sectors in manufacturing, aerospace, education, and in IT service management. I'm currently an auditor and consultant, as I said, and what that means is I go to our customers, our clients, and work with them on various service improvement activities. So that may be auditing against the service desk certification tool, against that set of standards, that framework, or it's looking at specific areas that the customer's trying to enhance. So that may be around customer experience, it may be the tool selection process, looking at a new ITSM tool. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. That's what I've been up to, and so what I want to do is talk about the customer experience and define what it is to start off with and why it's so important. Excellent. So the customer experience is, well, it's everything. It is the sum total of your customer's interaction with your service. So it includes what you'd expect. It includes the incident and request processes, but it starts before then. It starts before the customer even contacts the service desk. Their experience is being defined by the likes of their induction. It's being defined by the quality and appropriateness of the kits that you give them, the hardware and the software you provide. It's defined by your proactive communication, your engagement with them. And it's also defined, very importantly, by contact with your team at cross-functional meetings outside of the traditional break, fix, or request fulfill processes. So that may be a charity group within your organization, it may be a community group, but it could be socially. It may be that your team meet their customers on a night out, and that will also inform your customers' opinion of you and make up part of their customer experience. Just as a little aside, I would encourage any of you that manage service desk teams to get your new staff and junior staff, get them involved in those cross-functional groups. It's a really great way for them to start understanding the business, understanding their customer, and engaging with their customers outside of that stressful incident process. I've got I want to talk about why it's important, and I've got a quote that I'm sharing with you on the screen here. It's a positive customer experience. It is essential to your service. And when I first started in IT, I was working at a company called Whitbread Beer Company. It's a company with a number of different customer-focused areas. It's in hospitality, it's in hotels, it's in restaurants, and gyms, in fact, at the time. So I had a strong customer focus, and I went on an induction within my first week. one of the IT managers talked about the customer focus and the customer ethos. He was a guy called Kevin, and he was responsible for the IT service and support department, the department I was working for. During the presentation, he used the phrase that's up on the screen, the customer perception is your reality. And it's a long time ago, the phrase has kind of got out there, and you may have already heard this, but what it means is that it doesn't matter how good you think your service is, it's your customer's opinion that counts. And at the time when I first heard him say it was the first time I'd heard it, and I actually thought to myself, this guy's a genius to be able to sum up the customer experience, to sum it up so precisely and so perceptively, that I was really impressed. It wasn't until later I found out that actually it wasn't his quote at all. It was taken from Kate Zabrisky's book, Customer Service Excellence. Now, the reason I'm sharing this story is when Kevin used that phrase, in many ways I was the customer, I was the audience, I was in the induction. I was impressed by what he'd said, and it was one of the reasons that I respected him as my manager, as the manager of the team I was working in. He became a little bit of a role model. It's one of the reasons I turned up every day, worked hard to make the department a success. So my perception was positive as a result of what I'd heard. But it doesn't stop there, because what I didn't know at the time, and gradually found out over the years, is that Kevin had come from a sales and customer service background. He wasn't very technical. Now, any of you that are old enough to have worked in IT departments in the 90s may remember that it was quite a technical environment, and customer service was only just filtering through. And as a result, not everyone in the department valued those skills, and they didn't have the same perception as I did. So we can see that perception changes from person to person, because Kevin couldn't talk their language and couldn't talk in depth about mainframe servers and AS400s and so on. He didn't command the same respect that I had for him, because I valued the same things as he did. So customer experience is unique, and it's based on each person's specific needs and their personal experience. But, and I'm going to hang on to this quote for a little bit longer, it is a good quote, so we start to think about what the customer's needs are and why perception is so important to the customer experience. So good customer experiences earn goodwill. A customer will forgive an occasional lapse in service as long as their experience up until that point has been positive. And as an example, to illustrate this, I want you to think about a new starter joining your organisation, and that new starter needing IT support for the first time. This is where their customer experience starts, where their journey begins. They're likely to maybe ask a colleague how best to contact the service desk. Now, if their colleague's perception of IT is poor, and their response to the new starter suggests that the phone isn't always answered or the service staff are unhelpful, that colleague's perception is going to be passed on to the new starter. So already that new starter, their customer experience is negative before your first interaction. So those first impressions last, and the negative experience is really difficult to shift before you've even had a chance to prove yourself. And from that moment on, anytime you provide excellent service, exceed expectations, go the extra mile, the negative perception remains, and it means to that customer the service you achieved was probably because it was easy to do so, or it was down to dumb luck. On the other hand, when it goes wrong, you've done exactly what they expected you to do, and it's ingrained and reinforced that negative perception. That perception will stay with them for years, and in this story, that perception can be passed on to colleagues. It becomes cyclical, and as I say, it's very, very difficult to retrieve. In an alternative version of the story, the new starter is told that the service desks are wonderful, they're helpful, polite, supportive, and they're more likely to see any future problems as a blip, as a one-off. And they're more likely to accept an apology than raise a complaint. So good customer service and good customer experiences earn goodwill for the future, and they get passed on as well. Before we move on, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how you create great customer experiences, or how you create great customer experience. I do have a cautionary tale, and it's about a service desk that I visited not so long ago. Now, I'll be completely honest, I have checked the delegate list and I'm 99.99% sure that that this customer isn't here, and I'd like to think it's not identifiable, but it's an important tale. I was brought in to improve perception. That was what the service desk saw the problem as. And although I initially recognised that improving perception, as I say in the slide, it is not the goal, it's the outcome of good customer experiences. We set about investigating why this perception exists, and we started talking about event surveys, which are a fantastic way of gauging customer experience, of getting feedback from customers immediately after they've interacted with you. And I asked this service desk manager if they did event surveys, if they sent them out, and he said they didn't. And about to move on, and a colleague joined in and said, well, no, we do. And over the next 2 or 3 minutes, there was a bit of an argument, a bit of discussion whether they did or didn't send out event surveys. And this colleague sat down and opened up a spreadsheet, and it turns out that it wasn't their service desk tool that was sending them out. It was going out from their remote support tool from Bomgar. And so we opened up the spreadsheet, we had to look, and we found a list of literally hundreds of customer responses that come through Bomgar based on their experiences. Hundreds of responses, and within those hundreds of responses, dozens of complaints that ran over the course of several months. It wasn't dozens over a few days, but it was nonetheless dozens of people who were not only dissatisfied with the service they've got, but when they tried to do something about it, they were completely ignored. And we very quickly got to the bottom of certainly one of the key reasons why perception of the service desk wasn't what they wanted. So how do we create a good customer experience? It starts by understanding what your customers need and expect. It sounds simple, but it is that straightforward. My role is consultant and auditor. I probably visit somewhere around 30 different IT departments each year. I spend a relatively intense few days with them. I get to know them pretty quickly in that time. But one thing I always do when I visit a service desk is I always speak to their customers. And in those engagements, in speaking to the customers, broadly speaking, I can tell you that most customers want more or less the same things, the same 4 things. They want access to the technology they need to help them do their job, and they want that technology to work. It's a pretty basic requirement. If it doesn't work, or they need something different, they want to be able to contact the right person as quickly as possible. They want that person to deal with it immediately, but they accept that that's not always possible. But if it's not resolved on first contact, if it's not fulfilled immediately, then they want to know when it will be dealt with and be kept up to date until it's resolved. As I say, it's fairly straightforward and very simple, and I'm realistic, and I've been in enough operational roles to know that it really is that simple. We have limitations on the service we can provide, have limitations on the resources we have access to, the tools that we can use. We have unplanned absences and staff turnover. We have impositions on our service that we wouldn't choose. We have new services being introduced, not necessarily with the best handover. We have changes to our infrastructure, and of course we have human error. Those things aren't controllable, but what is important and what is essential for the customer experience is that we try, and we seem to be trying to satisfy everyone all of the time. So providing for these needs, it requires processes, instant process requests, fulfillment processes to make sure that the needs are dealt with efficiently. It requires quality management to ensure that they're followed consistently and effectively. But I'm not going to talk about those things today. Time permits, though there is plenty of resources on the SDI website in the big red toolbox that will talk about having those back-end processes, making your team as efficient and effective as possible. But I really want to focus on the customer experience in this session. So how do you find out specifically? We talked in general terms about what the customer wants. How do you find out specifically? And again, it's not particularly rocket science. Either, it's quite simply, you need to talk to your customers, engage with them, and find out what they want. And that engagement gives you an opportunity to explain to them what you can reasonably achieve. So it gives you an opportunity to manage their expectations. If you work in an organization that has a BRM function, so business relationship management, then that's a good route, that's a good place to start. If not, you may need to create something yourself. So what I'd recommend if you're doing that is the first step is to put together an engagement matrix. This is a list or a structure showing all of the key customer groups in your organization. It could be based on an organizational chart, and pick out and identify who represents those key customer groups and who in IT will meet with them. It may be that you spread it across the service desk or spread across managers in the team. Make sure that you choose people that have already potentially have an interest in that customer group area, or make sure that they're areas that your members of your team are going to be engaged in and interested in, maybe where relationships already exist. It's important to choose your audience well, because customer engagement and creating this engagement matrix is more about quality than it is about quantity. It's not about speaking to everyone. That's dependent on the size of your organization, but that's largely impossible. What you need to do is try and identify those people within the organization that have the widest reach and have the greatest influence. Often it's a case of harnessing a disruptive force. If there's people in there that are potentially critical of your organization, of your service, they're the people to bring in. They're the people whose perception that you need to turn around most readily. In my experience, I found that it's the PAs, senior managers, it's admin within a sales function or a marketing function. It's those kind of people who speak to the most people within the organisation, the people who have that, as I say, that wide reach and great influence. Your BRM meetings, they should be structured, they should be regular. Regular is really, really important, so that you can build and maintain that relationship and that engagement. What you may find is that encouraging customers to attend those kind of meetings is pretty difficult. They've got day jobs themselves, and this will be secondary to it. If you are struggling, one tip that I can pass on is that rather than trying to get them to attend a new meeting, is for you to attend one of their meetings. So if they have a monthly team meeting, try and get in there. Gives you an access to a wider group of people. You have a captive audience. The meetings are more likely to be attended, and even if your key contact isn't there, you can still attend and speak to your customers. I also encourage you to think about the agenda for those engagement meetings. It's one of the traps that I've frequently seen is that it's about it becomes about KPIs rather than about the customer experience. One of the questions I ask service desk customers when I meet with them is about performance reports, and generally I already know the answer to the question before I ask it. Do you see performance reports? Do you want to? If it's high performing service desk, customers don't really care about the KPIs. Senior managers, they're more likely to care. People who are paying for the service, they'll definitely want to see that information. It's because their decisions are going to be based on data, but it's also because they don't tend to have a customer experience. They need IT. They would often they would get someone else to deal with it, the aforementioned PAs. Or they'll be getting a false positive of the customer experience because they get VIP treatment. So customers tend not to be interested in KPIs. What they want to talk about is what specifically is happening to them or their colleagues. So how do you measure the customer experience? And there's a quote I do love to throw in a few quotes. And there's a quote that I really like, which is, if you can't measure it, you can't improve. And that's not always the case, but I think it's a pretty good rule of thumb. So what can we put in place that helps you measure and improve the customer experience? How can you put it into terms that you can track and monitor? When dealing with, particularly with internal customers, but as a managed service provider as well, what's traditional is that, there's an SLA document, and that's often written by the IT side. It's often a fairly weighty document. It's given to customers, and they generally accept it, maybe with a few tweaks. When we're talking about managed service providers, service desks as a paid-for service, it will be signed off at a senior level, largely based on costs, on affordability. Not, in my opinion, not enough appreciation of what those service levels actually mean to how the business operate. It tends to include the uptimes of services, for example, and target answer times for calls to the service desk. It's an important document, and I don't want you to go away thinking that you can throw away all your SLAs, because they are essential. They define the service that's being produced, but they don't rarely include anything about the customer experience. I also want to make an important point now, because I've come up on Slack here before. SLA has come to mean two things in IT. So it means SLA as in the document, the definition of the service, but it's also come to be used for the measure. So it's become a synonym for the KPI target around resolution times. We resolve these tickets within SLA, and both are actually relevant here, because neither are relevant for the customer experience, and in many cases the SLA as a KPI target doesn't often indicate good performance. I've got a really crude example that I'm going to throw in. I do think it's relevant, which is that if your SLA commits to 99.9% uptime, this allows 8 hours, 45 minutes, and 57 seconds of downtime per year, which is quite a lot of downtime. It is a crude example, but it would have, that level of outage would have a huge impact on a business, and especially if it happened all in one go. As I said, I worked for a service provider. I worked for IBM, and one of the systems I looked after generated $11 million of business per day in terms of partner service orders, and an 8 hour, 45 minute and 57 downtime would seriously have impacted on the business. If you take that example and think of retail, it's pretty much a day's trading would be lost, and that could cost stores tens of millions in revenue. And to take that analogy further, and that financial loss that could result in store closures, redundancies, it has a huge impact on a business. And yet, if there had been no other outages during that time, during that previous year, that would have fallen within the SLA target. SLA target would have been met. Is it an acceptable level of service? Of course it isn't, but it is within SLA. Just to stretch that a bit further, and just to put a slightly different spin, if you have a service that has an 80% target and you're achieving that target, you're not providing an 80% service to all customers. You're providing 100% service to 80% of customers, but you're actually failing 20% of your customers, and it's that 1 in 5 customers that will talk the loudest about their customer experience. So as an industry, we are starting to move away from that traditional SLA model, and we're moving towards what's being called an experience level agreement, an XLA. You may have heard the term. I'm not sure that it's particularly well defined yet. This is relatively new stuff, but the way I look at it is targets they're a blend of customer experiences that talk about the whole customer experience. So instead of having a 90% target for calls answered within 30 seconds, meaning that if you achieve, you're achieving it for 90% of your customers, but you are failing 1 in 10 customers. Instead of that, having a target that all calls are answered within 90 seconds. So stretching the time slightly, but aiming to achieve 100% within that timescale. So you know exactly what service you're providing. Your customers know exactly what service they can expect. They can expect a maximum wait at 90 seconds. Obviously, you're going to go under that. Other things to include within your XLA I talked about event survey results, and again, they are really, really important. They're instant. They give you an instant response on the experiences that a customer has had. My advice is to keep them as simple as possible. One question, 5 stars, for a rating 1 to 5. Did you get the service you expected? Did you get the service you needed? How would you rate the service? A question of that nature, and then maybe a comments field that allows them to follow up and give you further information if you need to. I would recommend a complaints, compliments and suggestions process. Pretty much the same process for all 3. The survey, event survey results can then feed into that process. Any 5-star top rated responses feed into your compliments. They're a compliment to pass on to the analyst that provided that level of service. Any 1-star rating need to be followed up, or maybe 1 or 2-star ratings need to be followed up as a complaint. I would strongly encourage you to put these processes within your ITSM tool. You need to be able to capture this information, you need to be able to monitor it, you need to be able to track it, you need to be able to report on it. What better tool have you got in your organisation than your ITSM tool? It just requires separate categories, potentially separate SLAs, SLA targets to reflect the different nature of the work. But looking at something along the lines of a response time, thank you for your input, your feedback. You'll get a response within this time, and then a target for maybe resolving a complaint within, let's say, 5 days. So there's a couple of ideas on how you can capture and measure that, and really want to sort of re-emphasize the importance of satisfying everyone all the time. That should be your aim, and should be something that you're ingraining into your staff, into your analysts. I'd like to talk a little bit specifically about the self-service portal, because this is it's an element of the customer experience that's becoming increasingly important. Self-service portals, of course, have been around for a long time, but we are seeing growth in their use. We run a survey at SDI, and the use of self-service portals has increased. It's gone from 64% to 74% in the past 4 years. So 74%, 3/4 of service desks have a self-service portal. Of those, most were launched within the last 2 or 3 years. Of those 26% that don't have a self-service portal, of those, 94% want a self-service portal, and of those, 61% actually have a plan to implement one. So it's likely that a huge percentage of service desks will have a self-service portal in the near future. Now, the surveys that we've done have showed that 90% of those that have implemented a portal did so primarily or partially to improve customer service. And yet in those surveys they show that only 53% of service desks are reporting an improvement in the customer experience. So we are investing as an industry in this tool. We're opening up this route. We are, by the looks of things, hoping that it improves customer service, but in many cases not seeing a noticeable improvement.
Matt, can I jump in with a question?
Yeah, you certainly can, yeah.
Thanks. I just noticed one posted, and it was just relevant to that little bit you were talking about our survey. So Anthony's posted a question asking where were our stats from, American sources or UK?
Okay, so I happen to have the report in front of me, and it's come from our Research and Insight department. It's based on, I believe, surveys that we have that we have commissioned. It's an SDI internal survey, and so it's circulated to over 25,000 service desk professionals. So they're likely to be members of SDI or affiliated with the SDI in some way, they may subscribe to our group on LinkedIn. It's distributed to quite a wide variety of
I think I'm right in saying that it's going to be, there's a mix of countries there. The majority will be UK, as you say. A lot of it will come from our sort of UK membership base, but there are other countries mixed in as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think that's
you.
Absolutely. Okay. So yes, we've introduced the service portal. We're hoping to improve customer service and enhance the customer experience by doing so, but in many cases we are not. And I think one of the reasons, and I'm speculating slightly, but I think one of the reasons that we're not enhancing the customer experience is that we're not giving the customer what they need, what they expect. And what I'd encourage you to do is consider the customer experience of a self-service portal outside of work and compare it with their experience with your portal. So if your customer outside of work, in their home life, they require some additional software from their phone, they tap on an app, they open Apple Store, they open the Play Store, search for an app, they download it. The whole process takes seconds. Very few self-service portals at the moment are automated in such a way. Similarly, if a customer wants a piece of hardware at home, and this could be computer hardware, but you can extend it to any product that they want to buy. So they could go to Amazon or Argos, or for clothes they could go to ASOS, and they can search and buy exactly what they need. In both cases, in terms of software, in terms of hardware, they can choose from a variety of options. They're visually represented. They have ratings from their peers that give them an indicator on what the quality of that product is. So within IT, our self-service portals are generally not that sophisticated. They're not that well put together, and generally use slightly different language. So the language of self-service portals, certainly the ones I've seen, tend to be using IT language. They do say things like log an incident, raise a service request, rather than I need help or can I get access to. So consider the language, and this needs to be part of your customer engagement strategy. Speak to them, speak to your customers, get their input, get their view, and make it something that suits and fits them. The reason that these organisations are so slick is because they know that it affects their returns, their revenue. So products, they've shown that if a product takes 1 to 2 weeks to be delivered, it's more likely to be returned because customers have had time to change their mind. So they are slick, and the delivery process is so slick to avoid you sending them back. As an anecdotal bit of evidence, the demographic of your customers is going to be changing. That's a given, and the importance of a portal will be driven by that changing demographic. So I was speaking to a young person. I talked about my experiences in IT in the 90s, so I think you probably can gauge roughly how old I am. I was speaking to a young person recently. They use their phone for everything. Their entire life is in their phone. The one thing they don't use it for is for speaking to people. So it's not a scientific survey, this is anecdotal, but my experience is that the young people, the people who are going to be joining your organisation would actually, in this case, and this is a direct quote, would rather change bank than pick up the phone and actually have to speak to someone. Whereas the thought of changing bank would fill me with absolute dread. So it may be different in your organisation. I'm speaking in general terms, but I think it is something to consider. The self-service portal is going to be more and more important to your customers as time goes on. The other importance of a self-service portal is around workflow, which is now fairly standard, but workflow is going to become automation, and automation is going to become machine learning. I don't know if anyone attended the conference that we held a few weeks ago, but there was a breakout session by IPsoft, and the session was hosted by Amelia. It was Amelia is an AI, a bit of tech, and it's technology that's it's cognitive computing technology that can now communicate like a human while simultaneously automating incident processes and request fulfillment. So the technology isn't quite yet there yet. I'm not saying that we should be looking to implement it but right now, but within the next few years these things will become mainstream. I would encourage you to have a look at IPsoft's website and look at what Amelia does. It's not just IT, it's looking for looking to replace that first contact in a number of areas. The case study on their website is around Enfield Borough Council using it as a customer interaction for customers of all their services. So have a look at the website, and there is another example in Germany. There's a retailer, I believe, called Otto, that's now using machine learning to predict what people are going to buy, and they reckon they can predict now with a 90% accuracy which of their 200,000 products are going to be sold over the next 30 days. This allows them to stock appropriately, and it allows them to dispatch more quickly. And the reason they've done it is to reduce this this 2-week time, this 2-week lead time to reduce returns, and they've actually reduced their returns by 2 million a year. And an important point, because when we talk about machine learning and cognitive computing, it does raise a concern around jobs. What are we all going to do in the future? But in this example, it didn't lead to job losses. Instead, because they were more efficient, their margins were higher. It actually led to an increase in staffing. They hired more people, and the people were there got to do more interesting things. So it took away some of that the less value add tasks. So that's pretty much all I've got to say on the subject. Hopefully, Zoe, there's some questions. I have got a summary while people think about their questions and post them in. So I'm not going to read through. I've talked enough over the last half an hour or so. I've talked enough. So so if you show the summary, there's 2 summary slides, and they're the ones that should sum up what I've been talking about over the last half an hour. And I'm stalling for time, so you can get some questions in.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Matt. Thanks very much. That's really great. I have got one question here. I'm just going to pause the screen there so I can pull this question out and read it to you. It's, sorry, it's gone. Hang on one second. So when implementing a new tool, do you have any suggestions on how it should be managed from a people side of things, is what it says. So so I guess suggestions around how to make that work with sort of buy-in from the team, things like that. If can the poster of the question, absolutely, feel free to send me some more comments if I've not quite got that right.
Well, I think I understand the question, because I think it's a relatively common problem. Implementing a new tool is a change, and we all know that people absolutely love change. Everyone loves change. So one of the biggest criticisms that managers get from their teams is that they don't communicate enough. And I've been in that position. I've done that role, and I tried communicating loads, just communicate. And actually what I found out that people don't mean communication at all. What they actually mean is they want to be collaborated with. So I would encourage collaboration from the outset, to get people's, when you're doing the requirement capture exercise, get people's thoughts and feedback and get them to input, and then they will have a greater ownership of the project. When I was talking about customers, get your greatest distractor and bring them on side. And it's sometimes, and I've done it, it can be quite a painful experience, but ultimately it's rewarding, because if they're a disruptive influence, they will continue to chip away and undermine the project at any opportunity. So bring in those disruptive influences.
Absolutely.
Collaborate.
And I suppose, as you say, you know, often part of the reason they're feeling that way is because they do feel a little bit disenfranchised as such. So perhaps, you know, the collaboration kind of addresses their issue as well anyway, in part.
Yes. Absolutely.
Let's just have a look at some other questions here. And what about a self-service portal specifically? Any tips on how you go about marketing that if you've got a new self-service portal, for example?
It's a good question. What I would, it depends on your organisation. So firstly, if you've got an internal communications department, I would encourage you to speak to them as early as possible. They will undoubtedly have some strong thoughts and feelings on how it should be managed, but I would suggest that when you go to them, they will potentially have their own engagement matrix outside of your BRM process that I talked about earlier, but they will have a list of key contacts within departments, or at least they should, and so they will help you to reach the right people. There's usually a strategy. It's and I'm not an internal comms expert, but it would start with putting some information on an intranet, just some FYI, this is coming up for people to come and see, and then have some more targeted communications. Your self-service portal is going to mean different things to different people, so try and target that communication to, if you've got people who are on the road and they're going to be using a mobile version of the self-service portal or an app, then have focused communication with them. People in the office who are going to be requesting for other people, then they're going to need a different tact as well.
Yeah.
Be as hands-on as possible. Get the help to the people. Do some floor walking. I always love a bit of floor walking. Yeah, there's a few things there.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's have a look. We've got time for perhaps one or two more. So there's one that says, this is an interesting one, we haven't really touched on it specifically. It says, I'm under pressure to set up a VIP program. And do you think that's a good idea?
Do I think it's a good idea?
It depends between organisation and teams.
It will, yes. I'd like to say that every customer's a VIP, and that's the exam answer. That's the interview question answer. But for your own job security, I pragmatically yes do it. I went to a service fairly recently, and their VIPs really were they were people that could and would make or break them, and it was absolutely essential that they were able to provide. It was almost a hotline, and that worked for them. You just got to be careful that there's no great differential between the services. As long as you're meeting service, providing a good customer experience for everyone, then no one will mind that people get VIP treatment. But if you're not servicing your regular staff, if you're not giving them an excellent service, they may begrudge it slightly. So you've got to, it will depend on your organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose also a big part of it is just having the visibility, just making sure that it's flagged up, like with any, relevant customer history, that any analyst that goes into that record sees straight away who it is that they're talking to and that kind of thing. Yeah,
and it's important for your newer staff to understand who they're talking to and the sort of language that they should be using.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Well, we are coming towards the end now. I've just seen somebody post as well asking if there'll be a recording made available. So just to let everybody know, yes, we are recording this session, and everyone who registered, in fact, whether you're here now or for those people that weren't able to make it, you'll get a link to the recording the next day or so. So yeah, we'll absolutely send that on. And I think we'll leave the questions there, Matt. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us and giving us your time this afternoon.
You're welcome.
Okay, great. And let me just remind everyone to check out our other upcoming webinars on our events pages on the website. And as Matt said, take a look at the sort of reports, things like that we've got for you there. And we'll end the webinar there. Thanks very much. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.